Welcome to Cloud OnAir, live webinars from Google Cloud. We are hosting webinars every Tuesday. My name is Gopal Ashok, Product Manager in Google Cloud. Today, I'll be talking about getting started with Redis on Google Cloud Platform. You can ask questions anytime on the platform, and we have Googlers on standby to answer them. Let's get started. When you look at what's happening today with businesses, most of the businesses are moving to public cloud platforms. Most of you attending this webinar probably are using Google Cloud today or some other public cloud platform, or are interested in moving to a public cloud platform. When we look at the various reasons why customers want to move to a public cloud platform, there are various reasons. One is to reduce infrastructure cost. Secondly, they move to the public cloud to gain more insights from data, to use the services in public cloud and analyze the data and get more insights from it. And thirdly, they want to rapidly build applications so that they can deliver services to their customers. So regardless of the reasons that you want to move to the public cloud, with Google Cloud Platform, we provide a number of services that allows you to basically build applications for your various needs. So if you look at the different types of services that we provide in Google Cloud Platform, you have the compute services. So for example, we have the Google Compute Engine, where you can provide infrastructure as a service. You have the container engine, so if you want to deploy applications in Kubernetes, we have a managed Kubernetes service for that. Or if you want to do like serverless applications, so there's App Engine and Cloud Functions. And then if you want big data services like Cloud Dataflow for stream processing or Cloud Data Proc for managed Hadoop, there are a number of services that allows you to provide big data solutions. So there are more, like if you look at the security and identity management services like Cloud IAM. So the bottom line is, regardless of the kind of applications and services that you want to provide, in Google Cloud Platform, we provide a large number of services to help you do that. But underlying all these applications and services that you want to provide, one of the key services that you need is a database and storage service. So depending on the application that you build, you may want to have a relational database, or you may want to have a NoSQL database, or you may want to have something like a data warehouse. So when you look at the managed database and storage services that Google Cloud provides, we provide a wide variety of these services. So for example, if you want a relational database, we provide Cloud Spanner. So Cloud Spanner, as you know, is a globally distributed, transactionally consistent database. Or if you want to have a document store, you have Cloud Data Store. Or if you want to have a managed data warehouse, you have BigQuery. So as you can see, there's a wide variety of services that you can choose from, and these are all managed services so that you don't have to worry about managing the databases yourself. So one of the key things that Google has focused on is, like, for example, if you look at Cloud Spanner, Cloud Spanner is one of the really large-scale database that Google uses internally to provide their services. So in this particular case, we provide those services in Google Cloud Platform so that you can leverage the power of Cloud Spanner and build your distributed applications on top of that. So apart from providing the services that I just described, one of the other key focus that we have is to make Google Cloud Platform an open platform. So what do I mean by that? So most of the customers today prefer to build applications on open source products. One of the key reasons you want to do that is because you want to be able to port your applications anywhere you want. So for example, if you're building an application using Postgres, for example, you want to be able to either do that on-prem, or if you move it to another cloud provider, you want to be able to use Postgres in any of the cloud providers. So in Google, we are very much focused on providing open source services. So for example, if you look at the popular open source databases that are currently available, and if you look at the DB Engine's ranking, for example, MySQL, PostgreSQL, Elasticsearch, Redis, et cetera, are very popular databases that customers are using today to build applications. Now, if you want to use those databases in Google Cloud Platform, those databases are available as services that Google provides, or there are partner services that you can use to leverage those databases. For example, if you're using Postgres, Cloud SQL for Postgres provides you a managed Postgres service. And with managed services, one of the key benefits that you get, of course, is that you don't have to manage the service. You just have to focus on building the application. Same thing with MySQL. So if you have MySQL, you can use Cloud SQL for MySQL. If you're using HBase, for example, we have HBase compatible APIs built on top of Cloud Bigtable. So open source is a big focus for us. Now, talking about open source databases, Redis, which is the topic of today's conversation, is one of the most popular open source databases available today. Now, why is Redis such a popular database? So from my perspective, the way I look at Redis is that Redis is a very versatile in-memory database. So when I talk about versatility of Redis, Redis actually can be used to solve a number of different use cases. For example, Redis, a lot of customers for example, in Google Cloud today use Redis for simple caching. So when I talk about caching, it could be as simple as caching some database queries, or it could be caching some API results. The other use cases for Redis typically are session management, where you just want to store session token. So when customers first start off with Redis, for example, they typically use it as a simple cache. But the versatility of Redis comes from the fact that it is actually a data structure server. What I mean by that is Redis provides a number of powerful data structures that allows you to solve much bigger use cases than simple caching. A very good example is gaming leaderboards. So with sorted sets in Redis, it is very easy to build leaderboards for gaming applications. Similarly, for stream processing, or if you're building IoT services, Redis provides a number of great data structures in order to do that. So if you look at an example of how Redis gets used, one of the examples that we commonly see is stream processing. So in Google Cloud, we see customers using stream processing for solving quite a number of different use cases. This is a very typical example that we see where customers use Cloud PubSub for basically ingesting events that they want to process. So a very good example is that if you want to process like credit card transactions and you want to be able to make decisions on that, you can use Cloud PubSub, which essentially is basically an event streaming engine that allows you to ingest events pretty quickly. And then you can use Cloud Dataflow in order to process these events very, very quickly. One of the key use cases for Redis that we see in this particular architecture is that customers use Redis to basically store states that they want to really look up really quickly, or if they want to store some aggregate data that they really want to retrieve for further processing. So this is a very good example of how Redis gets used for stream processing use case. So one of the key things that customers have been asking from Google Cloud Platform is that they want to be able to have a managed Redis service. So till now, customers have been deploying their own Redis instance, and they've been managing it themselves. What I'm happy to say is that we now have Cloud Memorystore. Cloud Memorystore, which is currently in beta, is a fully managed in-memory data store service for Redis. So what I want to do for the rest of the presentation is to walk you through Cloud Memorystore and walk you through the capabilities that we provide. Like I mentioned, the service is currently in beta. So let's take a look at what Cloud Memorystore provides. So one of the key principles that we followed for Cloud Memorystore is to make sure that the service is fast, scalable, highly available, and secure. And more importantly, we wanted to make sure that you are focused on building applications, and we can take care of just managing Redis for you. And that's essentially what we are doing with Cloud Memorystore. So with Memorystore, it's a fully managed Redis service. One of the key things that we provide is high availability. Typically, when you look at caching services, you normally don't see SLAs associated with it. With Cloud Memorystore, we provide 3 nines of SLAs for one of the tiers. And finally, the Memorystore is obviously built on Google's scalable infrastructure. We provide a high level of security based on both the networking infrastructure and also using role-based access control. So I'll talk more about these features in detail as we move forward. But I just want to quickly point out that with Cloud Memorystore available in beta, it's going to be very easy to use Redis with your application because now you don't have to manage your own Redis when in Google Cloud Platform. So let's take a look at some of the features and that are available with Cloud Memorystore today. The first thing I want to touch upon is how we expose a service. So Cloud Memorystore provides two tiers of service, a basic tier and a standard tier. So what is a basic tier? So basic tier basically is a single Redis instance. Where we see customers use basic tier is when customers want to use Redis as a simple cache. In this particular case, application can tolerate the Redis instance losing the data, and they simply want to have a cache that is actually cheaper in cost. The key thing about the basic tier is that we do the instance monitoring. So what that means is that if something happens to the instance, we have health monitoring in place that will basically take care of restarting the instance and recovering the instance from failure. When you recover the instance from failure, obviously the IP address is maintained so that the applications can simply reconnect without any changes on the application side. One of the key things about the basic tier that I want to point out is that we don't provide an SLA for the basic tier. So the standard tier is essentially what you want to use if you rely on Redis as one of as a key component in your application and you want high availability for Redis. So what do we do with in the standard tier? We provide a replicated instance of Redis. We provide one secondary replica, which is deployed across zones. So what that means is that if there is a zonal failure, then your applications are unaffected because we automatically fade over the Redis instance over to the other zone. The other thing that we provide is seamless scale-up of capacity. This is also available in basic tier, but the key difference here is that in standard tier, when we do the scaling of the instance up and down, we provide high availability for the instance, and I'll talk more about it when I show the demo. And lastly, like I mentioned, with standard tier, you get 3 nines of availability. I want to note that the availability SLA is applicable when we go GA. It's not applicable in the current beta release. Okay, so the other thing that I want to touch upon is, apart from the tiers, we also provide what we call capacity tiers. So the way we expose the service is the more memory you provision, the more throughput you get. So as you can see in the table, if you provision up to 35 gigabytes of Redis, you get about 3 gigabits per second in terms of network throughput. And if you provision like greater than 100 gigabytes of Redis, you get 12 gigabits per second network throughput. So the key thing to note here is that when you plan your Redis deployment using Memorystore, you want to consider what your application throughput characteristics are, and depending on that, size your Redis instance appropriately. One of the key aspects of Redis is that Redis is single-threaded, so you always will have, in most cases, you have sufficient CPU for these instances. The key thing that you want to note is how much network throughput you want to have before the application saturates a Redis server. So the capacity tier basically tells you the network performance that you get. It also determines the pricing of the Redis instance. So the way we have priced Memorystore is by dollar per gigabyte hour. So what does that mean? So if you're provisioning 1 to 4 gigabytes of Redis, so anything less than or equal to 4 gigabytes, you will be charged at 4.9 cents per gigabyte hour. Similarly, as you go higher up in the capacity range, obviously your gigabyte hour pricing is actually going to be lower. Standard tier instances similarly are priced using the same capacity ranges, but the pricing is going to be more compared to the basic tier instance. Like I said, Cloud Memorystore is a managed service, so we make this provisioning extremely simple. We allow you to provision Memorystore Redis using Cloud Console or command line, or using Google Client libraries. And the other key thing that we have done is we have integrated with Terraform. So if you are managing your infrastructure as code, you can use Terraform to provision the Redis instance. One key thing I want to point out is that we are supporting Redis version 3.2.11. We will be looking at supporting more versions later, but currently in beta, what is available is 3.2.11. Just want to quickly touch upon high availability and what we do there. So the key thing I want to point out here about high availability architecture, or when you deploy a standard tier instance, is that you're connecting to a single IP. And that's basically we take care of the redirection of the application connections to the right VMs if a failover happens. The other thing is that we provide automatic failovers. So we have our own health monitor that monitors the instance. We monitor the health of the processes, and if anything goes wrong, we automatically failover. And the failover time is actually very, very fast. It's actually in the order of seconds. So in terms of application availability, you get pretty good high availability with the standard tier instance. And finally, security. The key thing that we try to do with Cloud Memorystore is to protect the instance from external attacks. So when we provision the instance, we provision it using private IP. So when you provision a Cloud Memorystore instance, it's not accessible from the internet, because it is provisioned using a private IP address. The other key thing you can do is to limit the access of the instance using virtual private network. And we also support cloud identity and management roles. So we have granular IAM roles that allows you to control access to the Redis instance based on your organizational rules. And the other key thing that I want to point out, which actually became relevant very recently, is critical patch management. So Redis recently announced a critical patch. We actually applied the patch even before it was publicly announced. So one thing you can be sure of is that your Redis instances or Cloud Memorystore instances are always secure because we take care of the patching, and you don't have to worry about it. And finally, I want to touch upon some of the other features and capabilities. I talked about scaling seamlessly. So we allow scaling of the Memorystore instances, both basic and standard tier. You can scale your memory up and down. With basic tier, obviously, you will have your cache flush because it's a single instance, but the standard tier scaling is a highly available operation. We have integration with the Stackdriver, and I'll talk more about it in the demo. And we also will be providing the capability to back up your data using RDB snapshots, which will be coming soon. The RDB snapshots is it's not currently available in beta today, but we plan to make it available pretty soon. And lastly, because we are built on open source Redis, we are protocol compatible. So what that means is that if you're running your own Redis instance today, you can switch over to Memorystore instance with very little or actually no code change, and everything should just work. Okay, so that's kind of the summary of the capabilities that we provide with Cloud Memorystore. So let me quickly switch over to the demo and show you how easy it is to deploy and manage Cloud Memorystore. So to get started, you go to the Google Cloud Console, and Memorystore is it's a storage and database service. So if you click on Cloud Memorystore, it'll take you to the Memorystore landing page. One of the key things I want to point out here is that if you're provisioning Memorystore for the first time, we automatically enable the API for you. And once the API is enabled, you can start provisioning the instance. In this particular case, I have provisioned instances already. But let's go ahead and create an instance and see how easy it is to do this. So when you provision an instance, the first thing that you want to do is give it an instance name. I'm just going to give it, let's say, demo instance 2. As I mentioned, the Redis version that we provide is 3.2, so you don't have an option to select a version in the beta release, but we will be providing support for more versions later on. And the next choice that you want to make is whether it's a basic or a standard tier instance. Like I mentioned earlier, basic tier is a standalone instance, and standard tier is a replicated instance. In this particular case, I'm going to choose standard because I want to deploy a highly available instance. And the next thing you want to do is select the region where you want to deploy the instance. So The key thing I want to point out here is that if you choose zone as any, we automatically pick the zones for you for both the master and the replica. But if you want to specify the zone where the master is going to be deployed at the time of creation, then you can go ahead and select a specific zone where you want to deploy the master instance. But even if you select a zone for the master, we will automatically select a zone for the replica, which is different from the zone that you selected. In this particular case, I'm just going to leave it at any. And over here, this is where you select the size of the Redis instance. As I mentioned, if you change the size of the instance, you basically get different network throughputs. So you want to be able to determine what is the network throughput that you want to get out of your Redis instance and size the instance accordingly. And lastly, you want to pick the network that this Redis instance is going to be authorized to connect. So what that means is that only VMs connected to the VPC network where the Redis instance is provisioned can actually access this particular Redis instance. So let's go ahead and create the instance. So as you can see, it is actually very simple to go ahead and create this instance, create a Redis instance using Memorystore. One quick thing I do want to point out is that I talked about scaling. So I already provisioned a basic instance here, and it is currently 1 GB. Now I want to go ahead and change that to, let's say, 10 GB. As you can see, it's super easy. All I have to do is go to Edit Instance and change the size of the instance, and then click Save, and we automatically do the scaling for you. As I mentioned earlier, when you scale a basic tier instance, we recreate the instance so it's a full flush of the cache, but we preserve the IP address so that applications can retry and connect back to the same IP address. Okay, so now I talked about Redis getting provisioned on a private IP address. As you can see, the IP that we currently use for the demo instance is 10.0.0.4. So from a connectivity perspective, there are a few things to keep in mind. One is you can only connect to the Memorystore Redis instance from within the same region where you have deployed the instance. So that means you can connect, your application has to be running in US Central 1 to be able to connect to this particular Redis instance. Secondly, you cannot access the Redis instance outside of the region, obviously. So for example, if you're connecting from your laptop or trying to connect from your laptop to the Redis instance, you may not be able to do that directly. Okay, so let's look at connecting to the Redis instance. Like I said, Redis is protocol compatible. So I'm just going to run a quick standard Redis benchmark and see if that works. And as you can see, we use open source Redis, so any of the tools that you use with open source Redis works great. In this particular case, I'm just running a Redis benchmark that basically does a get set, push and a pop. As you can see, we get pretty good performance when you're using Memorystore instance. Now the interesting question is, okay, how do you monitor the instance? As I mentioned earlier, we have integrated with Stackdriver monitoring. So to get to Stackdriver, let me quickly show you how to do that. So if you want to get to Stackdriver and see the Redis instance, you basically just have to go onto Stackdriver and click on monitoring. And if you launch Stackdriver monitoring, you can get to the Redis dashboard. So when you look at the dashboard, as you can see, we expose a whole bunch of metrics that makes it very, very easy for you to monitor your Redis instance. So in this particular case, you can see the average network throughput, you can see the CPU utilization, you can also see, you can see the average commands per second, you can see the 95th percentile latency. So there's a lot of things that we actually expose as part of Stackdriver. So let's take a look at what all the metrics are that we expose. So to see the metrics, what you can do is go to Resources and go to Metrics Explorer and just type in redis.google APIs. And you will see the list of all the metrics that are currently published for you to monitor the Redis instance. Okay, so as I showed you, it's very easy to go deploy a Redis instance. It's protocol compatible, so that means any of the tools will work that you're currently using. So if you're currently using a self-deployed Redis instance and your applications are using Redis for whatever reason, it's very, very easy to switch to a memory store instance. And finally, I touched upon some of the features around monitoring. So if you want to be able to manage the Redis instance, it's very, very easy to manage it because we automatically provide the monitoring for you so that you don't have to integrate with any third-party tools to do the monitoring. Like I mentioned, we take care of the management of the Redis instance so that you don't have to worry about patch management, etc. All you have to worry about is just writing your application and using Redis for what it is meant for. Okay, so that's pretty much the Cloud Memorystore product. It's currently in beta. We are planning to go GA pretty soon. But if you are interested in testing the product, you can do that using free credits that are available with the Google Cloud Platform. And if you want to have more information about Memorystore, you can also go to google.com/memorystore, where we have the documentation and more information about the service. Thank you very much. Now we are going to take the Q&A. Okay, so we have a few questions from the audience. I'm just going to quickly address some of the questions that are showing up here. So the first question is, will you be providing support for Redis 4.0? Yes, like I mentioned, currently in beta, we are only supporting 3.2, but we plan to provide support for Redis 4.0 pretty soon. We don't have an exact timeline, but soon after GA, we expect to be able to provide support for Redis 4.0. The other question is, I see the current limit is 300 GB. My application requires close to 1 terabyte of Redis data. What are my options? That's a very good question. So like I mentioned, the basic and standard tier are essentially single instance Redis. So what that means is that there's only one master, and it is not a scale out Redis cluster solution. In this particular case, one option is to basically deploy multiple instances of Redis and do a client-side sharding. That's one way to do it. The other thing that we're working on is obviously Redis cluster. Again, this is in our roadmap, and we are actually working towards providing a Redis cluster. But till then, the limit is going to be 300 GB. Is persistence supported in the current release? Very good question. So this is something that currently is not supported. So let me clarify what we mean. Let me clarify persistence a little bit. So there's RDB and then there is AOF, at least in 3.2. So we plan to provide RDB snapshots very quickly, where you can take RDB backups to a GCS bucket. AOF is something that we are working on, and we should have that pretty soon. But currently, neither basic or standard tier provides AOF persistent. And finally, when is the product going GA? We expect the product to go GA by September of this year. So we are actively working towards that, and we hope to have that released in September. So that's all the questions that I have. Thank you very much. Thank you for attending the webinar. Have a great day.